Welcome back to Aging with Power. I'm your host, Myles McNamara, on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. And today we are speaking with the ladies of Henry Mayo Hospital to help us understand the minefield of admittance and discharge when we do have a hospital visit that we are involved in, either ourselves or with a loved one. And we're talking to Kim Pointer and Susan Sockeld, our Director of Case Management and RN Case Manager, regarding that process. So we've talked about coming in. You're assigned, someone becomes your person, and now you are overseeing their journey through the hospital from a case management point of view. So let's continue that conversation. And Kim, I know you brought up at the break something regarding observation versus inpatient level of care. What is that?
Well, it's very important for patients to know what level of care they are in when they're in the hospital. Just because you're in a bed in the hospital and you spend the night does not necessarily mean that you're an inpatient. And the difference is, let's say a patient comes through the emergency room with abdominal pain. Well, the physician at that point does not know the cause of the abdominal pain. So Medicare states that the physician has a time frame that they can do testing to try to figure out if that patient should be discharged or should be placed as an inpatient in the hospital. So a person might come in as what we call observation, so the physician can observe them and run those tests. Sometimes when it becomes really important is when you might need to go to a skilled nursing facility when you leave the hospital. A skilled nursing facility will not cover your care unless you have been an inpatient for 3 midnights. So if you have Medicare and you go to skilled nursing, you qualify for up to 20 days of a stay, and Medicare will cover that. If you have not been an inpatient, you haven't been 3 midnights in acute care, you don't qualify.
Can you be 3 midnights of observation?
No.
But I mean, is it possible? So
Yes.
you don't get the classification you need for discharge, but so a patient is there for 3 midnights, but under observation.
That is entirely possible. Our department works very hard after the first 24 hours to speak to physicians to find out, hey, where are you headed with the care of this patient? Because we hope that if they need inpatient care, they have an order for being an inpatient. It causes people much angst when they find out later, well, I've been in a bed in the hospital for 2 nights. What do you mean I'm not an inpatient? It's more expensive for the patient. They have a copay. Their Medicare is now paying on an outpatient basis. So it's, their care could cost them quite a bit more money than it would if they were an inpatient.
So from a doctor's point of view, why is that hair split? I mean, it just seems so commonsensical to me that if you're in the hospital, you're admitted, but you're not. You're under observation. So why the distinction?
A couple of things. Physicians are very interested in their patients and providing the absolute best care that they can. It's not on the top of their mind to determine, is it observation or is it inpatient? Many times they look at case managers to help them with that. It's also important to know that when a patient is in the hospital, that physician is concentrating on medication changes, tests that need to be run, surgery that might need to be done, so you can understand why they're not really hair splitting. They're not really thinking about that. The main difference, though, is we have to bill according to the services that that patient needs based on medical criteria. So a physician just can't automatically say you're an inpatient if you don't need to be an inpatient in the hospital. That would be what we would call fraudulent.
Right. And you wouldn't be the only one to call it that. So when and again, nobody knows this, and hopefully that's what this show will provide for folks. And let me just say, too, folks, if you're listening to this, you don't have to be scribbling notes. This show will be broadcast on our podcast library within 24 hours, so you can let your friends and associates know that they can tune in on hometownstation.com and listen to the podcast. So when someone is brought into the hospital and it's first time ever, they don't know a person named case manager exists. So is there anything in the hospital is a patient advocate? Is there somebody, who does someone talk to other than that doctor that we know is a fleeting possibility at best, that they can say, hey, I need help, who do I talk to, who's my person?
Well, it's a case manager. Every morning we do our rounds in the morning. So in the morning, when we arrive on the floor, we meet with the charge nurse, and then we go to every patient's room and introduce ourselves, and let them know that we are their case manager.
Okay.
At that point, we'll give them our card, and if they have any questions, we try to answer the questions at the bedside at that time, or else we meet with them multiple times throughout the hospitalization. Also, the staff knows if a patient has a concern, they will always call the case manager. We are located on every floor from about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning until 4:30 in the afternoon. So we are present on every single med-surg ICU floor all day. So we are present for the patients.
So you guys are right up, people know who their person is right away.
Yes.
And then, of course, the first time the family comes in to see someone who may not even be conscious or such, you make sure that everybody
They interface
knows.
with us, yes.
All right. Well, we're going to take our next break, and when we come back, then we're going to see how social workers kind of weave into this whole combination of things, and how everything sort of comes together for the patient care that goes on over at Henry Mayo. And then we'll start talking about some other things that Henry Mayo does for our community as well. So you are still listening to Aging with Power, and I'm still Myles McNamara on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome back, folks. You're listening to Aging with Power on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. And we're talking about case management, discharge planning, and social work, and your journey through a hospital should you ever have the opportunity to partake in that. And we've been talking about case management and discharge planning, which we'll probably revisit a little bit more before the show's over. But we're going to kind of shift gears right now and try to explain what the difference between case management and social work is. And I've got two social workers in-house, as I said, Elizabeth Tarantini and Ajale Harris. And a real quick special shout out to Elizabeth, because I know when I had my stay in the hospital, you really came alongside us and was such a great help to me and my wife, and helped us navigate the system. So I know I've thanked you 100 times, but now publicly on air, thank you, Elizabeth.
Of course.
But so we'll start with you, Elizabeth. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then how the whole social work aspect of the hospital visit comes into play, and what exactly is social work.
Okay, I guess I'll start a little bit about myself. I'm an LCSW, which is a licensed clinical social worker. All of our social workers at Henry Mayo are master's level social workers, or an MSW. And I've been in the field for about 20 years, primarily maternal child health, but also throughout the hospital. I've worked in most areas within the hospital and was able to help your family as well, which was a pleasure, by the way. So what about social work? Case management and social work, where Susan had left off essentially, is when a family does come in and you're assigned a case manager, you also have a social worker. And the case managers and social workers truly work side by side, hand in hand. The case managers look at managing the family throughout the stay. We help with a lot of the other concerns that have to go on. So we are looking at things like their emotional response, maybe to a new illness, how they're going to adapt to a new cancer diagnosis. We provide families with resources and crisis intervention and support at that time. So we help them throughout it, whether it's a trauma, whether it's an injury. That's kind of where we kind of tag team, and also homelessness, which is a big issue here in Santa Clarita that we all work on. So we work on a lot of different issues, everything from substance abuse, mental health issues, homelessness,
Aging.
aging in general, making sure that people have the appropriate care, are getting the appropriate care at home when they are discharged. We start, in a sense, discharge planning from day one. Both case managers and social workers, when we go in and do a thorough psychosocial evaluation on the patients that we see, to assess their psychosocial, spiritual needs, to make sure that as a whole, these families and these patients are as shored up as possible. One of the examples I always give is sometimes it's a very small window of opportunity when people in our community come into Henry Mayo. They have their own dynamics at home. They have their own support at home or lack of support at home, other dynamics that go on. And it's sometimes coming into a community hospital, maybe the only opportunity that people are able to get the help that they need. And maybe the only time that it's really identified as an opportunity to get that help. So that's where social work really comes in. We're there to make sure that we're providing the resources, the counseling to provide the direct mental health support that the families need and the resources they need as they journey through the hospital and even crisis intervention when they come in, like through our ED.
So kind of put things in perspective, the case manager sort of works hand in hand with the doctor to oversee the diagnoses, the medical treatment, the journey on that level, whereas the social workers come alongside the family and or the patient and make sure that, again, spiritually or resources or whatever it is, more of a personal level from when they're going to continue their journey out of the hospital.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurate.
Okay. And then the discharge planner obviously is sort of running point with both of you guys then.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so just kind of as a side note, then what is the distinct Webster definition? I mean, is a discharge planner still also an RN and an MSW or LCSW as well?
In many places, in many hospitals, a case manager does all of that. But at Henry Mayo Newhall Hospital, we are so lucky that we have a separate population of nurses that do only discharge planning. In our facility, those are the licensed vocational nurses or LVNs.
Okay.
So we have RN case managers and LVN discharge planners, alongside our master's prepared social workers, some of whom also have licensed clinical social work licensure.
Okay, so there's actually still a place at Henry Mayo for LVNs then.
Yes.
For some reason, wasn't there kind of a short time period where LVNs were almost left out in the cold?
No, the majority of them went back to RN school, and the hospital helped them get their RNs.
Awesome. That's
Yes.
awesome. Okay. And then one thing you touched on, Elizabeth, real quickly, is the whole the spiritual side of things. I know you guys have gosh, I can't believe I'm forgetting her name, but that's typical.
Chaplain Marjorie.
Thank you, Chaplain Marjorie. I always, sorry, Marjorie, but because I always see her in the halls of Henry Mayo and stuff.
Yeah.
So obviously you work hand in hand with Marjorie
Yes,
as well.
we
I mean,
do.
that's a huge part of this, I bet.
Huge part, yeah. We work we just kind of help identify the needs, see what kind of social supports we can put in place, and we work hand in hand with Marjorie on a lot of our floors and a lot of our intervention, and her staff. She has additional staff that's wonderful. But we do try to make sure those connections are all there, and that, your spiritual support is a large part of your support, a large part of your coping. And that's the other thing that we're assessing for is coping.
Right.
And in times of stress, in times of crisis, and in times of mental health issues, we need to make sure that we're shoring people up with all the supports that they can.
Right. And then I know, and we're going to get to Agile after our next break as far as some of the other stuff, but you probably, I mean, you guys have a ton of support groups over there at the hospital.
We do.
And
Yeah.
so is that part of the social works
Yes.
kind of world as well? Because
Yeah.
I know a lot of times when people are first diagnosed or they come to the hospital, you seem to think you're the only one experiencing this. You're the only one that's ever experienced this in the past, and you're on an island, so to speak.
We have really great groups. I've run in the past our grief group, which we take people all the way through and help them through their grief process. We have an amazing grief group led by Katie Cianci. We have a cancer support group that's amazing. So if you need any help or people need to get support through their journey with cancer, we're there to support you. We have a stroke support group run by Kay Cutie, who is amazing with our stroke support people and caregivers. We have a caregiver support group. We have a mommy time support group, which I run, which has to do with maternal mental health and postpartum issues. And this week is actually Maternal Mental Health Week. We know 1 in 7 moms does suffer from postpartum depression. It's one of the leading issues for young women and young families going through. So we like to bring awareness to that as well. But we have support in place. We're really lucky that Henry Mayo supports us in making sure that the emotional and psychological needs of our patients and families is taken care of.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to run away for our next break, folks. And when we come back, we're going to chat who's been sitting here so quietly with Ajale. And we're going to talk about her passion, which is helping the homeless and the veterans here in Santa Clarita through the support of Henry Mayo as well. So don't go away. You're listening to Aging with Power on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.